Okay, in this video, I'd like to talk a little bit about unit conversions. For this Algebra 2 class, we are bouncing back and forth between financial algebra previews and math for tech previews. Since most of you for next year's math class will be taking either financial algebra or math for tech, I thought we'd spend some time talking about both of those courses. Now, in the Math for Tech class, one of the important skills that you develop and continue to practice are unit conversions. We've got a few simple ones to chat about today, but in the Math for Tech class, the work tends to get fairly complicated. And for example, these types of conversions down here are definitely not ones that you'd all have memorized, but that you would reference in the future for some pretty complicated conversions that you might use in your field. But if we start here at the top of the handout, this pair of rules tends to be the ones that I reference the most. If you're dealing with two units that are both metric, then this top table is very, very helpful because anytime that you're converting metric units, all you really have to do is move a decimal point. And if you memorize this chart or print a copy of this chart in this order, then the movement between your units is described by the movement in this table. So for example, if you're dealing with a kilometer, here's your prefix kilo. So if you're dealing with a kilometer and you need to convert that into a meter, well, that is 1, 2, 3 steps to the right, and therefore you would move your decimal 3 steps to the right. And so this chart written in this order does a nice job of reminding us how to complete those conversions. For any other conversion, if it's standard units or if it's a standard unit mixed with a metric unit, you'll probably want to use this set of rules down here. And this is just a handy reminder of when to multiply and when to divide. But you must have a conversion factor in this process. If you don't have a conversion factor, then you won't be able to use this. And that's what the bottom half of this handout is all about. These are all kinds of different conversion factors. By the way, it's worth noting that you could use this method with metric units as well. You're just multiplying by tens or hundreds or thousands, which would essentially complete the decimal movement as well. But in order to use this set of rules, you've got to think about the size of the unit in which you're dealing. If you're taking a large unit like miles and converting to a small unit like feet, since miles are larger than feet, you're going from a big unit to a small unit, you would multiply by your conversion factor. And the opposite is true as well. If you're starting with a small unit like ounces and you want to convert to a larger unit like gallons, well, ounces are smaller than gallons, so you're converting from a small unit to a large unit. You would have to divide by your conversion factor. So if we take a look at just a few examples here, if we're converting from 300 grams to kilograms, well, both grams and kilograms are metric. Since they're both metric, I can use the chart on the top, and we're starting with 300 grams. Grams, that's one of our base units, so that's right here. And we're trying to convert to kilograms. So we're inside this box, and we have to move 1, 2, 3 steps to the left. So if I'm dealing with 300 grams, whose decimal point is implied to be right here, all I have to do is move that decimal 3 points to the left. 1, 2, 3. And it now sits right in front of that 3. So we would say that 300 grams is the same as 0.3. Anytime that this decimal lands over here, I like to include the 0 out front. 0.3, and you can include these extra decimals if you want, 0.3 kilograms. 300 grams is 0.3 kilograms. In the second example, how many centimeters are in 12 meters? Well, here's a meter unit and centimeter unit. Both are metric. So we're going to use the chart on the top. This time we're starting with 12 meters. We're starting with 12 meters, 12.0 meters, so 12 meters, and we're converting to centimeters. So here again, meters are a basic or primary unit in the metric system, and if we're changing from meters to centimeters, well, that's starting in this center box, going 1, 2 boxes to the right, 1, 2 boxes to the right. So if I'm converting here, I need to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So what was 12 by itself becomes 1200. So we're not saying 1200 meters, we're saying that 12.0 meters becomes 1200 centimeters. Now again, we could have used multiplications here as well. We would just have to know the conversion factors for all of the metric units. And to me, it's just not worth it to memorize those metric conversion values if I recognize that I can move decimals only. So that's the technique that I generally prefer. Now for some examples with our standard unit conversion using conversion factors, we need to convert 1,320 feet into miles. Well, feet are smaller than miles. So we're changing from a small unit to a large unit. Small unit to big unit. Feet are smaller than miles. So if we're going small to large, then we're going to have to divide by our conversion factor. Now, some of these conversion factors you already have memorized. By conversion factor, I mean how many feet are in 1 mile. That's the conversion factor. There are 5,280 feet in a mile, but in case you forgot, let's see if that's on this list. Well, as it turns out, I don't see it on the list, so that's one you should have memorized, or maybe we can jot it down here. 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet. I have 1 mile and how many yards are there, but I don't have feet. But again, that's one you should have memorized, so hopefully you do already. But again, we're going from a small unit to a large unit, so we're going to take this 1,320 feet and divide by our conversion factor, 5,280. And I can use a simple calculator here. 1320 divided by 5280. And all you gearheads out there should recognize that 1320 is a quarter mile, or 0.25 miles. So the next question, how many gallons are 6 quarts? So quarts and gallons are standard units, so we're going to have to use our conversion factors. We are starting with 6 quarts, so we're going from quarts to gallons. So that's a bit weird the way this question was written, but we can interpret that. 6 quarts are being changed to gallons. Now, quarts are smaller than gallons, so we are converting from, again, a small unit to a big unit. So small to big means that we are going to divide, and unless you know how many quarts are in a gallon, you may have to look up our conversion factor. And here it is. 4 quarts are in 1 gallon. So we're going to use this conversion factor of 4. So let's take 6 quarts, divide, since we're going from a small unit to a large, divide by 4 quarts per gallon, and 6 divided by 4 is 1.5 gallons. And we've now converted 6 quarts to gallons. So if you've got an engine that takes 6 quarts of oil to fill, but you can buy oil by the gallon at the parts store, well, You can't get by with just 1 gallon. You're going to need to buy 2 of those gallon jugs, and you'll have some left over. In the last example of this video, we're going to convert meters to yards. And I know most of us believe that meters and yards are the same, or at least very, very close. It is important to determine which one's larger and smaller so that we know the direction of our conversion. Now, as it turns out, a meter is just a little bit larger than a yard. And we can tell that by looking at this conversion factor. 1 yard is 0.914 meters. So a full yard is not quite a full meter. That tells me that the meter is a little bit larger. So if meter is larger than yards, then that tells me that we're going from a bigger unit to a smaller unit. Meters are physically larger than yards, so that tells me again we're going from a big unit to a small, so we must multiply. So we've got 100 meters. We need to multiply this by our conversion factor, and I just realized something. I think this set of conversion factors needs some clarification here. And never mind, I'm just misreading this. So we're in this top chart, we have customary or standard units that are being converted into metric, but it's the bottom group that uses the metric values and converts them to standard. So this is the group that I want to be referencing here. Sorry about that. We're starting with a metric unit and we're converting to a standard unit. So metric to standard, I better use this conversion factor down here. So clearly, if you had used this conversion factor up top, the 0.914, that would have given you a different answer than 1.09. And in fact, it would have given you an incorrect answer. So do be careful and please make sure that you're using the correct conversion factor here. 1 meter is approximately 1.09 yards. So if we're going from meters to yards, we will multiply. We're going from a large unit to a small unit, and the conversion factor we want is 1.09. So 100 times 1.09 comes out to be 109 yards. 100 meters is really 109 yards. So there's a little bit of a preview for what's to expect or what's coming up next week. Of course, all of our questions are not going to be this simple. They're going to be a bit more involved than this, but these are the basics that you need to have a good understanding of before we proceed. Please let me know if you have any other questions.